As Works Manager, let me welcome you to our open day at Winnington Works and invite you to see some of our activities. But first, let me tell you how Northwich came to be the centre of the British alkali industry. About 200 million years ago, this region was an inland sea surrounded by tropical forests. Later, the area became a desert. The sea dried up, leaving rock salt. Fossilized coral formed the limestone hills of Derbyshire, and the forests became the coal deposits of Lancashire, Yorkshire, and the Midlands. Only a few thousand years ago, the last ice age carved a system of waterways and harbours out of the plains, so that today we have easy means of transport by road, rail, and water. That is why John Brunner and Ludwig Mond came to Northwich 93 years ago to make the basic alkalis, sodium carbonate and caustic soda, from the brine, limestone and coal that lie within easy reach of Liverpool, from where they are exported to all parts of the world. Ever since then, Winnington Works has made remarkable technical and social progress. Employing over 2,200 men and women, Winnington is a big community, which not only makes a substantial contribution to the total output of ICI, but also serves the nation by providing basic chemicals for home consumption and for export. Now you can meet some of the people who belong to this community and see what they do. To help in this, I've asked Mr. Irvin of the Division Information Service to take over and, so to speak, conduct you around the works.
Right, let's start with the raw materials.
First, limestone. Here comes an 800-ton load from our quarry at Buxton, bound for Winnington. A couple of million tons a year come over the hill to make alkali. 1,000 feet below these railway tracks lie the dried-up remains of that inland sea, now a thick vein of rock salt. Brine and waterworks bore down into the salt, dissolve out controlled cavities, and collect the brine that is forced to the surface. The brine is pumped to Winnington and stored here top field. We get an excellent view of the kilns, where the limestone train is just unloading. There, the limestone is burned with coke to form quicklime and carbon dioxide gas. Both are used in the process. Here's Jim Hatton picking up limestone. Now the stone handling team are having a refresher outside the halfway house. That jovial type is Frank Horrigan. The team is joined by Assistant Foreman Joe Hayes. He seems to derive some amusement from the size of Jim Curzon's special teacup. The stone is now on its way up for mixing with coke and on to the top of the high kilns. Up top is Howard Helsby, about to drop the coke and stone into the kiln. In the kiln control room is Foreman Norman Dutton chatting to leading hand Bill Dutton, no relation. From the kiln top we can see the lime plant. Down there, burnt lime is slurried up for use in the process. The camera picks up maintenance men working on the grit pump. Fitter Malcolm Hayes appears to be enjoying his work, and rigger Brian Hall likes the idea of being filmed. From under a dissolver comes Eric Oakes, still bearing a lovely tan from his recent Spanish holiday. In the lab, Mrs. Alice Weaver changes towels. Alice is the first woman to represent Winnington Works at Central Council. Bill Hacksteeg brings in a sample from the dissolvers. Watch the colour change from pink to white. Now flowers are part of the Winnington scene. Daymen leave off for their midday break, but inside the ammonia soda plant the shiftmen keep the process going all round the clock. The brine has been saturated with ammonia. It is then cooled here and sent back to the carbonating towers. Joe Lizowski and Marion Major from Area 1 Maintenance load tubes for retubing one of the towers. Riggers in the team now take over. Fred Bagshaw, Herbert Pemberton, Dick Jump. At the tower control panel, Assistant Foreman Ivor Roberts is briefing Tom and Frank Garstang. He's joined by Tom Moore with a group of process trainees who are, in effect, chemical plant apprentices. Their training fits them to compete for places amongst the senior process men and foremen of the future, but the sky's the limit. We are now at the nerve center of the ammonia soda process, housing the most up-to-date scientific equipment under the control of men like process foreman Frank Hausman, here with Fred Sweeney. At the control panel is George Sturgeon. Leading hand, Jim Peters, at the computer control, presses the button that tells him the state of the plant at the moment. This computer makes its own immediate adjustments to keep the plant working smoothly. Behind the control is all the complex equipment needed to provide the information required. This gives Kenneth Palin, Instrument Artificer Apprentice, a grand opportunity of keeping up with modern technology. Frank Casey, also a works first aider, checks an instrument under the supervision of his foreman, Aubrey Wheelhouse.
Here's Bernard Robinson, Chairman of the Employee Representatives of Winnington Works Council and ETU shop steward. Let's have a word with him. Morning, Bernard.
Good morning, Sir.
I haven't seen you since Scarborough. You're going to Blackpool?
Yes, I'm going to Blackpool. I'm going as a representative of the Friendly Society Committee Management. Bob Jones and Mrs. Weaver are going as well, and I shall just be there to assist. We rather look forward to this, as it gives us a chance to have a go at the main board and get some answers from them.
Yes, now you've got lots of other interests. I believe Barnton Cub Pack is one of yours. You've been to camp?
Oh, yes, I've been to camp. But Kirby Long's there. We got a bit wet, but we hope it's better next year.
Well, so do we all.
Yes, right.
The carbonated liquor from the tower is separated by this filter to leave crude bicarb. Mike Healy is taking a sample and is joined by Roland Evans. In the maintenance foreman's office, a planning and progress meeting is being held. Joe Wadsworth, maintenance foreman, reports progress to his area engineer, John Laycock. This and future maintenance is discussed with members of the operating management, Ted Harding, process manager, Philip Turner, assistant process manager, and Pat Riley, process foreman. Winnington Works was founded in the grounds of Winnington Hall, which is still kept as one of the division's guest houses and senior staff clubs. Nearby is the building housing both the caustic soda and calcium chloride evaporators. Bill Davis dips the caustic mud settlers to measure the depth of clear liquor. In the evaporator control room, George Moore records evaporator readings. At the panel is Jim Bogue Munro, works councillor. He's now left us to take a Cheshire Inn. A third member of the evaporator control team keeps a close eye on the recording instruments. Arthur Tom takes a sample from the mud filters. He is joined by Jim Thomas from the salts filters. Jim appears to be well satisfied with the sample. Tom Deakin, caustic plant foreman, checks the condensate position with Peter Clark, the operator. This chart, with many others from all parts of the works, eventually finds its way to the process record section, where Miss Ruth Holt raises a query on one of the charts with Harold Cook. With them is Tom Owen, maintenance manager's clerk. I can remember when the hand-fired stokers were a really moiling job. Now that the caustic pots are oil-fired, it's as easy as this for Bill Packer to change the burner. Up on the dizzy heights of that stock tank, it looks as though Sid Jackson and Norman Vernon are doing a spot of estimating. Now here we have a caustic pot weighing several tons being loaded onto an empty bogie by Area 6 maintenance men. Fitter Jack Makin signals the crane driver, watched by Joe Duncan and Tom Partington. Stan Frith, the maintenance area foreman, keeps an eye on the operation. Rigger assistant foreman Jack Broadhurst supervises the job. At the packing point, molten caustic is being run into drums by Albert Stubbs. Walter Clark feeds and seals the drums. Nearby, caustic in powder form is being run into drums by Jack Wakeling. A word with Len Williamson, his assistant foreman, and Ike Holgrave heads up the full drums of powdered caustic. After cooling, drums of solid caustic move on past the stock bank and are dropped off the conveyor by Ernie Plum. Eddie Pickering backs up his lorry for loading. Now, where's it all going to? Well, it'll finish up being used in the manufacture of such diverse products as paper, food tins, and soap. And as the drums swing down, Walter Podsiadlo safely guides them onto the lorry. On the river, caustic is being loaded into our coaster Polythene for Belfast. That's Joe Holbrook seeing it aboard, watched by members of the crew. This plant produces calcium chloride, which is one of Winnington's most recent products. It's used in refrigeration and, in increasing quantities, in civil engineering. Here comes Harold Cunliffe, who was transferred from our sandbatch works in 1932 and travels every day from Road Heath near Stoke. We leave him having a chat with George Sankey. This lady with a pleasant smile is Mrs. Myrtle Green, one of our cleaners. Through the old lodge gates of Winnington Park, we approach one of our liquor loading points. There we find Ken Ross loading a tanker with calcium chloride liquor. Ken has recently been elected to Winnington Works Council in a by-election following the departure of Jimmy Bergman Rowe. The driver shuts down the cover and another load of calcium chloride liquor is on its way. Now, one of our best-known byproducts is bicarbonate of soda, with which we're all familiar. In the control room of this plant, we find John Higgins and Ozzie Hodgkinson. Jack Hickson is an assistant foreman in charge of packing and loading this product. The main packing point for refined bicarb is this automatic machine operated by Harold Roberts. John Thomason check-weighs a sample to ensure accuracy. For, in addition to home consumption, bicarb is exported all over the world. Over the road from the bicarb plant, here's something interesting. A heap of green glass, but it's soluble in water, and from it is made one or other of Winnington's many sodium silicate solutions. The silicate glass is made by fusing sand with soda ash in a furnace. It's just been opened up by John Hulse. Joe Goff rakes out the molten glass at a temperature of approximately 1300 degrees centigrade, and soon the fiery, treacly mass is streaming from the furnace. The glass drops into water-filled conveyor buckets for cooling. There goes Walter North, the evaporator man, whose job is to ensure that the right grades of silicate are produced from the glass to suit the customer's requirements. And here the finished product is being loaded into a customer's tanker by Tom Cropper. This particular load will be used in making soap and detergents. On top, Bernard Bowden dips the tanker for liquor level. As the tanker leaves, we catch a glimpse with the loading team of leading hand Peter Wakefield and foreman John Igo. I knew John when he was with me out in Cura in the early days. You may remember silicate as water glass. That stuff that Grandma used to preserve her eggs, as George Timmis, the byproduct foreman, demonstrates. Let's use dinner time to meet Alf Waddington, District Secretary of the AEU, with Ken White, one of his shop stewards.
Hello. It's always nice to meet you at the silicate plant because this was my baby when we started up about 1937 or so. Anyway, what do you think about the open day?
Well, it's not really my kettle of fish open days. I mean, rates and conditions are more in my line.
Oh,
Having said that, I think it'll go over.
We're keeping you busy, are we? With rates and conditions?
Aye, you're keeping us busy on conditions, all right.
These tall silos hold sesqui. You will probably recognize sesqui, coloured and scented, as bath salts, or mixed with other detergents in a gay packet in your kitchen. Inside the plant there is Sam Millington packing sesqui, and Joe Pennington stitching the bags. Bill Sharps, on the forklift truck, takes a loaded pallet and waltzes it away into stock. Now here, in one of our oldest plants, is a form of soda which you all know, soda crystals. Stanislav Sakharski breaks up the crystallized soda and shovels it into bogies. We intend to modernize this plant entirely to eliminate this hard and laborious work. The raft of bogies is taken off by Herbert Dean to the crushing and grading plant. Soon the soda crystals are packed in the familiar blue packets. This operation is supervised by Miss Dorothy Bebbington, who is here with Mrs. Alice Sidibovich. Let's meet more of the ladies who make sure that you get your washing soda in good condition. That's Mrs. Valentine Clough, Miss Daisy Lewis and Mrs. Hilda Dixon, Miss Olive Merriman, Mrs. Susan Clark and Mrs. Annie Edwards. Mrs. Elsie Dunn feeds the empty packets to the machine. Miss Elsie Darlington, Miss Doris Unsworth. In yet another plant, caustic soda is reacted with bauxite to produce sodium aluminate, used mainly for water softening. There's Jack Finnerty at the filter. The aluminate goes over to Arthur Bolshaw for testing. Arthur's first aid experience came in extremely useful in a recent works accident. The power plant is the heart of the factory. From the firing floor, we can see these huge boilers producing high-pressure steam for electric power and for use in the process. At the control panel is Bill Ravenscroft. He discusses the boiler conditions with Sellerman Mick Jones. These are the turbo alternators producing the electric power. George Tompkinson turns on some cooling water. Electrical equipment is maintained by our electricians like Ernie Goodyear, here with Assistant Foreman Cyril Tompkinson. In the power control room at the console is Cecil Terry, who has the responsibility of controlling power between Winnington and other mid-Cheshire works. Now here's Bert Cross, Assistant Foreman, showing a new intake of youths round the works. These boys are given a general training and some formal education to enable them to learn the various skills that are needed to keep the works going. But all work and no play makes Jack a dull boy, they say. So the youths are allowed some time for physical recreation. This scratch game of football on the Jubilee field looks like producing some budding internationals. Watching them is Jack Hagan, Site Services Foreman, whose responsibilities include training youths. The boys occasionally come in for unusual jobs. Here we see two of them assisting the camera team making this film. Len Young and Jimmy McCormick. Now Jack Jolly, a building trades estimator, is over there discussing values of a job with bricklayer Frank Gilgrass. Jack has many outside interests, including chairman of the Northwest Divisional Council and local secretary of the Building Trade Workers Union. He's also a member of the National Insurance Tribunal. Frank, for his part, is his shop steward. Harold Bracegirdle carries on with the job, helped by Matthew Lyons. You'll remember the crude bicarbonate we saw at the filters. Some of it will have gone through this spanking new finishing plant to produce soda ash, our basic alkali product. Herbert Buckley's job is being studied by Rafe Hewitt, well known in local football circles. The finished ash is loaded into railway wagons. Ted Evans records the weight. 1965 will be a year to remember. It's the first time in over 30 years that soda ash has been made at Winnington. Seeing a train off is Jack Gorst, Assistant Foreman, and Ernest Jones, Assistant Transport Manager. They are joined by Harry Malem, Rail Transport Foreman. On the day that we filmed these scenes, Ernie Jones had completed his 46th year with the company. Frank Barrow couples the engine onto the train. Alan Bates takes off the brakes. Jack Millerane starts up the loco, and away goes another 800 tons for use in making soap or textiles, for the chemical industries, or for the 1,001 other uses that civilization finds for Winnington soda ash.
Well, there it is. We couldn't show you all our employees, nor more than a small part of our plants, processes and products. But we do hope that this film has given you an insight into the things being made and the good work done by all of us at Winnington.